Have you ever looked at someone's life and thought, I can't imagine how they ended up there? Maybe it's a woman holding a sign at an intersection, a man sleeping in a car, a child who's dropped off daily at school, hungry and disheveled. Likely, these stories feel far away from your own life. But what if your knee-jerk reaction is wrong? What if those people we so quickly judge are more like you than you think? This is Not That Different, a podcast about the stories behind the statistics, where we look at the real people behind the statistics of homelessness here in Cleveland, Ohio. Because when we stop and listen and we start to understand, we learn that really individuals experiencing homelessness aren't those people. They're mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, friends, the people Christ calls us to love. Today we're talking with Sam, and Sam, I am so sorry I forgot to ask how to say your name. So go ahead and just tell me your last name so I don't mess it up.
You are all good, Jamie. My name is Sam Jablonski. It's got a deep Polish roots to it.
Love it. Well, thank you, Sam. He's a community researcher and a partner who worked alongside the city mission to better understand the needs of Cleveland's Ward 5 neighborhood. Through his research, Sam helped us take a closer look at the challenges, strengths, and opportunities within our community, giving us a clearer picture of how to serve our neighbors effectively and thoughtfully. His work reminds us that meaningful impact starts with listening well, and that is something that is so important to me. So I am so glad that you're here today, Sam, and I'm Jamie Buxton. I'm the Senior Manager of Community Engagement at the City Mission, and I'm your host for this podcast, something I'm still trying to figure out how I got the job for. But I've dedicated my entire career to working with men, women, and children at the City Mission, and I'm humbled to be part of this podcast and to help our listeners and those who are watching via YouTube unpack and unfold what it really means to be experiencing homelessness and how we're more like the people that we're serving at the City Mission than we are different. So, Sam, just tell me a little bit how you got the job that you have, how you got into research, and what it is you actually do.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jamie. Super excited to be here. I lead a small research firm called Jablonski Research Group, and really my focus is helping manufacturers, helping folks in the real asset sector, helping folks in the nonprofit world understand the challenges they may be facing, or if there are crossroads of opportunity, what their different options are within that opportunity. And it's something that I kind of stumbled into through a bunch of different experiences through the real estate world, through strategic consulting and those kinds of things. But I've had a lot of fun building and growing this work. And typically I start with that explanation, and people say, "Hey, that's great. What does that actually mean? What do you actually do?"
Exactly.
And I think putting in context of the city mission and my work with you all helps a lot. So the city mission, for example, has a lot of great folks on staff doing community-facing work, or doing programming, even finance folks, operations folks, some of whom have been on this podcast before. But when an organization like the City Mission comes to a crossroads of opportunity, or you all are facing a net new challenge that might be outside of the scope of what you've dealt with before and what you've seen before, that's where I get really excited to jump in and gather all the kind of existing context, all the existing conditions of that problem, that opportunity, and package them so that I like to say folks can start on, call it square three and a half, instead of being at square zero and not understanding, okay, what's going on here? What can we do? Instead, jumping into their roles and really picking up with the problem and saying, hey, this is what we can run with.
I love that. So tell me, how did you get connected with the mission? I mean, I'm just going to redo that question. How did you get connected to partner with us? Who knew you, or who did you know that connected you initially?
Yeah, I was doing a previous project with a bunch of Cleveland leaders and folks that had come together, really looking at tackling the affordable housing challenge in Cleveland. It's such a big issue here. Folks typically wouldn't think that, thinking about a smaller Midwestern city like Cleveland. You think about housing affordability,
Right.
places like New York, LA, metropolitan areas. But Cleveland suffers a really unique set of challenges, and uh, Cleveland leaders had come together saying, "Hey, this is unacceptable. This is something we need to work on." And I had the opportunity to get involved researching with that project, and really exciting work going on there as well. But Linda U. Vegas, obviously the mission's CEO, was one of the leaders involved in that project. And we worked through that, and towards the end, she pulled me aside and she said, "Hey, we're running through some of our own opportunities and questions of the
Mhm.
mission. Is that something that you would be interested in jumping in and helping out with?" And anytime that I can align the work that I enjoy doing with a mission that's really interesting and something that I'm kind of already bent towards and passionate about, and then shares the common faith element too, was something that I immediately jumped towards and said, "Absolutely, how can I help?"
I love that. I love that. So we probably should have said this. You're from the Cleveland area, born and raised, or post
Yes,
school?
born and raised in Cleveland,
Okay.
left for a few years down to Columbus for school and for some
Okay.
work down there. But Cleveland is home, and really a lot of my work focuses around helping folks in Cleveland, helping local manufacturers, nonprofits that are operating with Cleveland for the good of Cleveland. And those are things that really get me going. I think the city is a really special place, and somewhere that can use that kind of help.
I love that, and I totally agree. Cleveland is home and should be home to lots of people. But I'm loving that you were taking a deeper dive into affordability. That's something we talked about on a recent podcast. Um, and I think a lot of people don't understand when a lot of people question, you know, um, our need for existence of the city mission and shelters, and like-minded organizations. People wonder why, and really it's that lack of affordable housing in Cleveland. So thanks for your work on that. And glad that you rubbed shoulders with Linda because I know that we have so many things that we're thinking about where and what the city mission will do next. And so for our listeners who aren't as familiar with kind of how we lay out, um, the city mission, our main campus that we call our administrative offices, and then where we serve men is in the Midtown area, Ward 5 of Cleveland. That's what we're going to be talking about with Sam is that particular area. So Sam, why was Ward 5 an important place to study and better understand?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jamie. So as you noted, City Mission is kind of split between a couple different Cleveland neighborhoods downtown, and probably properly in the Midtown neighborhood, bordering right on the Central neighborhood. And then all of that is encompassed in Cleveland's Ward 5, which contains a couple other neighborhoods to your south as well. Um, Really, the purpose of focusing the look on Ward 5 was more uh, strategy based, more practical than it was anything.
Mhm,
A need to get accurate numbers, right? And the national census, Cleveland city data pulls on a ward basis. So it was a look at, okay, which ward are you all in, and what's the immediate opportunity to serve? And I think
mhm,
important to stop and note what were the questions that we were trying to address, and what was brought to me, what you all were looking at, is really kind of a two-pronged opportunity, a short-term focus and a long-term focus.
mhm,
The short-term being, hey, we do great work downtown at the Crossroads campus, serving men and bringing those men in from all kinds of different places around Cleveland and
right.
offering really specific programming to them. But we're also cognizant of the fact, and you all have done things in the past, and even do things today with that immediate community, because there's a lot of need in that immediate community. So that's kind of the short term, is what can the mission do in the immediate future to
Mhm,
engage and serve that immediate community? And then in the long term, it was an idea of, okay, as we serve that community, how do we become a hub that the community really trusts, that is either empowering other organizations to do their work better in downtown Cleveland, in
mhm.
Ward 5, and meeting real community needs through doing that. So that's what we were looking at, and the idea for choosing Ward 5 was really looking at where can we get good data, and how can we organize that in a way that we're accurately showing, okay, these are the needs that are proximate to the city mission.
Awesome. And so what did you discover about those needs of Ward 5 community? And then on top of that, what were most surprising or what were your, yeah, I kind of figured that kind of moments?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think we all, and the title of the podcast hints at this a little bit too. We all have um, a conception in our minds of what we think of when we think of an impoverished area, when we think of an area that has certain challenges and could use help like this, right? And a lot of what comes to mind is lack of employment, is poverty, sometimes higher crime rates, things like that.
Hmm.
So I don't know that any of that was really necessarily a surprise. The rates of poverty are really extreme, and that can be difficult to research, difficult to dig into to learn that over 60% of people in Ward 5 are living below the poverty line.
Hmm.
And of that 60%, like a third of residents are living in what's called deep poverty. So a level of income that's half of the poverty line.
Wow.
And those are really challenging statistics. Um, but in a way, not shocking when we think of an area that has challenges. And I think what was more surprising to me in the research and what came out was um, around the demographics and who lives there and who doesn't live there. If
Hmm.
if you look at an age chart of the ages of folks by gender that are living in Ward 5, um, men are pretty stable, from birth to death. It's kind of consistent.
Okay.
Women, there's a spike between 20 and 30-year-olds. And what that's telling us is there's a real concentration of mother-aged women,
Hmm.
of young single women in Ward 5. And where that's really most dramatically obvious is the rates of single parent households, and looking at a single father household versus a single mother household. Only about 1% of single parent households in Ward 5 are father led, whereas I think like 81% of single parent households in Ward 5 are led by a single mother.
Hmm.
Um, or sorry, 81% of households with children in Ward 5 are led by a single mother. So it's,
Okay.
really the vast majority of kids growing up in Ward 5 are growing up without a father figure, without a dad in the picture, raised by a mother, a female figure, but without that father figure in the picture. And that was something that really struck home to me, and I think struck home to the whole team at the City Mission.
Absolutely. Not to throw you for a loop because we didn't practice this beforehand, but do you know how many of those homes where mom is there, where grandmother is also in the picture, where we've got then three generations of family living together?
Yeah, it's a great question. The census data doesn't get that granular to
Okay.
capture that specifically, but there's, I think, taking a step back, there's a real multi generational culture in Word Five,
Right.
and oftentimes we think and focus about the problems. We don't focus on a lot of the strengths, and that's something that Word Five has that I think a lot of other areas of Cleveland lack, where folks are going out on their own earlier, or not living with parents, not living with grandparents. And that's a real unique identifier of Ward 5, is that there is a high rate of we live with mom, but we also live with grandma. And there,
Hmm.
even example, there's a strong contingent of four generation households in Ward 5. So
Wow.
it's an interesting question, but yeah, they don't have the exact number, but it is common.
Interesting. Okay. Um, Were there any assumptions that maybe you had when you researched this? And I know you kind of already said that, but that really challenged you, that really, I don't know, you read a stat and said, oh, that can't be right. I've got to push back and really lean into this.
Um, I would turn that back on you, Jamie. And I'd say, you know the area from working there a
Yeah.
lot better than a lot of our listeners, or than I even do, right? Because
Mhm.
that's your day to day. Would you be surprised to learn that there are 42 unique nonprofits, unique government agencies doing work that's specifically focused on Word 5 today? There are 42 of those in total.
In that neighborhood, you're saying? In Ward
Yes,
5.
yeah, just focused on Word 5.
Wow. Yes, I am shocked to know that. I know there are a lot. I know there are a lot. But 42 seems really large to me for that specific area. I think one of the reasons I love Cleveland is because of the deeply rooted um, bend toward a philanthropy, but also just compassionate ministry. So interesting that we have that many neighbors trying to do the work, whatever that work is, because I know I can't pigeonhole that, but yeah, trying to do work to help people. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really stuck out to me as, you talked about stats that you have to go back and double check. I checked that one a few times, and 42 is kind of what the big research poll yielded, but that's not even to say that, we're not including everybody or not including people that have, some kind of focus on Word 5. And what it really tipped me off to, and I had the opportunity to talk to some of your team about the research as well and present it to them. And we were all surprised by the amount of work being done, definitely, but also surprised by kind of the lack of collaboration. And, there are 42 individual entities at work, but it doesn't always feel like that, right? And doesn't always feel like we have that kind of net of support around Word 5. And that was something that we were really looking to identify and understand what to do with that.
Mhm.
How do you respond to knowing that there's all that kind of support, but that it's not necessarily tied together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something, that the mission as an organization, but even just me personally, that's where my heart beats fast is when it's time to talk with others. And so, I think that really leans into this next question is, how important do you think it is, Sam? And I think you've already given a hint for us to be able to find points of communication between all these different organizations, and really not just the organizations, but the community itself before deciding how to create, what comes next for any ministry.
Yeah, yeah, and that was a real challenge in what we were looking to do because there's a lot going on and it's not organized, right? It lives
Yeah.
on the internet, it lives in people's heads, it lives in community meetings and
Hmm.
board meetings. But there's not a central place to go to to understand that. And your question kind of has two parts. How do we understand what's being done, but also how do we understand what the community still needs, what
Hmm.
the most pressing needs are? Because a lot of what we found was there's enough help, there's enough assistance that if you come in assuming that you understand the need, if the mission turns the community, assuming that they already have a good finger on what's needed, could really miss the mark on what's actually impactful for the community. And that's been done enough that that can erode community trust, definitely, and it can ultimately do more hurt than it does help when you come in without a servant's heart and come in, assuming that we understand. So I think on the interconnected side, working with other organizations, really important to understand what work are they targeting and what are they best at that the mission might not be as well poised to do and um, needs they might not be as well poised to meet, and then where are the gaps in there. And really it's a Venn diagram, right, of what are other people doing, what are the needs, and then what's that slice in the middle that's not being done, but that meets real needs for Word 5. And that's, I
Hmm.
guess, really what we're trying to identify is where is that gap today.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really great answer. Thank you. When I think about what you just said and really what I was asking, beyond good intentions and the willingness to hear and collaborate, what is required to actually have community impact, meaningful community impact?
Hmm. Yeah, Jamie, that's it's challenging to get at, right? Because if it was easy, we would see a lot more change. And it's challenging to determine and discover what's gonna move the needle for this community. What's going to be something that has a lasting, continuing impact. And those were words that came up a lot as we were discussing as a group, as I was researching, is really this idea of wanting to do something, wanting to build something that is evergreen, that's lasting, that
Mhm.
has a sustained impact. And I think one way to look at that is what hasn't worked to date. And some of the things that haven't worked are, like I mentioned, the lack of collaboration and coming in with a new program that might overlap with somebody else's. I think other things that haven't worked are um, like talking about a lack of sustained vision. Not having a
Mhm.
continued vision, not putting consistent effort into a program, or not sustainably funding a program, and coming in with a couple years of funding, but not something that can be lifted up and continued. And I think those are the more easier to identify. Okay, if we put these things if we put these things in place, excuse me, um, then we can create, really lasting change. But I think even deeper than that, kind of the thread you've been hitting on is leading with a servant's heart and coming in, not assuming the needs of the community, even not just coming in on the sole basis of research, but really coming in with a listening ear saying, hey, we've done our due diligence. We have some ideas about what might help, but we also want to hear what is it that the community thinks that they need, and what is it that is really um, pushing folks' day-to-day lives. Like, I think something that might surprise us about Word 5 is, you think urban, you think in the city of Cleveland, you would assume that they have good grocery access and good access to food. And that's something that, as I'm sure you're well aware, is not in the neighborhood today, not in many of our urban Cleveland neighborhoods today.
Right.
I think that's just one example of, we can come in assuming what the needs are. We can come in kind of with a blind eye to what's already being done, but um, the real needs could surprise us.
Agreed. Thank you so much. I think I'm as you're talking, I'm listening to your passion and you know, it leads me to think, how do you not fall in love with every organization and what they're doing um as part of your role? Like, how do you, well, one, how did you say, okay, I will help the city mission, but then you're just already passionate about the things. I'm ready for you to come join the city mission staff.
Yeah, that can be a line I have to draw, right? Is folks will say, "Oh, this is really helpful. Like, we have to keep this going." And it's something I'm still learning, is understanding, like, what does a healthy project with a client look like, and like what is the call it the breakup stage, the
Yeah.
when we decide that you're going to run with this and I'm going to take a back seat. And I've actually had some really good conversations with Linda about, what does that look like? But no, it's tricky to not fall in love with the challenges and what people are doing, because it's so easy to get fired up about, especially for me when this is really what hits home, and getting to sit with this. And I think finding the overlap between the work that folks like you are doing, and then
Mhm.
my own skill set and passion around the data and putting it all into an Excel spreadsheet, and spending hours in city census data, and spending hours in city of Cleveland data. Um, that for me has been a real blessing to figure out where those things connect. But understanding where to break it off can be a challenge. And
Yeah,
short answer is always want to be able to be a resource where I can jump in. And am grateful to have the opportunity to do things like this, to be on this podcast, to even have served the city mission in general. But then at the same time, I like to say that, your leadership team and even your folks on the front lines, the folks doing this work every day, like you, Jamie, know this work so much better than I ever will. And I can't pretend that just because I jumped into data and interviews and research for a couple months to learn Word 5, that I can understand all that. So I think my job is to get the lay of the land, right, to understand what's going on. But it's your job to understand, what do we do with that, and what direction do we take this?
for sure. And even as you think about, um, breaking up well with you and then determining where we go next, I think you also hit the head of the nail when you were talking about, we can't do everything, right? We've got to understand what exists, what the needs are, and where we can actually intersect. One of the biggest, um, for me, working in ministry, one of the biggest difficulties can be, oh, I see a need and we have to fill it. And as Christians, I think we want to do that. And I'm not saying that we can't always, but as an organization, we have to stay real focused on what is it that we're doing, what we can do well, and how we can actually meet those needs, and not just jump all around. Because if Linda said yes to everything, we wouldn't do anything well. And so, knowing our community, knowing the needs is so important for her to be a leader for us, and then for us to then actively engage in these sorts of secondary. They're not secondary, though, really primary conversations that follow this understanding to decide, what the Lord would have us to do next. So thank you for your part in that. I think based on what you've seen, where do you think the city mission has the greatest opportunity to make a difference in Ward 5?
Well, that's the question, isn't it,
Yeah,
Jamie?
quit turning it around on
That's
me, Sam.
sorry, that's that's what we were out to discover is
Yeah.
what what should you all do from here,
Yeah.
and what are the opportunities? And I think um, to take a step back, just asking the question is a great place to start in terms of we're doing this set of core things really well. And you're right that serving the community is definitely not secondary, but it hasn't been the call it the bread and butter of what the city mission has been doing through building Crossroads and building Laura's Home and building up those programs into the great um, service fixtures they are today. But then turning that around into okay, what else can we do? And you're absolutely right that if you ran to every challenge, Cleveland's a great place, but there are enough challenges to keep the city mission very distracted and
Yes.
very very off the mark of what the main things are that you should be running towards. Um, and so I would say asking the question is the best place to start, and then from there it's um, in the research, we were able to identify here are some of the key themes, and we've ran through a couple of those in terms of the amount of single mother households and the amount of the lack of father figures, the uh, lack of food options, the lack of employment options, some unique challenges that Ward 5 faces that could really use the help of someone like the mission. And I think the exciting thing now is that you all get to dig in and understand how do we go about that? Because even just looking at the challenge of call it a single mother challenge, do you choose to serve the single mother that's in that position and support her and maybe support her with childcare so that she can leave the home and seek employment and better her situation that way. That's one way of going about it. Do you seek to serve the children and work on that issue through the next generation, right? And help those children to raise families where there is a father figure and where dad stays in the picture. Or do you choose to serve the fathers who are currently absentee right now, and teach them how to become a fixture of that community? I don't think that there's one right answer to that. I think that's the beauty of what the mission is looking at doing now. So I would answer your question by saying that really, whatever angle of the problem that you all choose to own and to champion and to say, hey, this is something we're not just going to talk about, but we're going to take action on. And we're going to be committed to having a real focused long-term impact in this specific area. That's what's ultimately going to be the most impactful for Ward 5 and for the work you all are doing.
Awesome. I think for our last question, you can't turn this one around on me.
I'll
What
do my best.
what gives you the most hope for Ward 5, for the community, the people, the organizations that exist? What gives you the most hope when you think about the future of this neighborhood?
Well, that one's easy. The city mission's there, of course. No, the it is a real spot of hope for sure. But I think you can turn it back to the 42 unique groups that are involved there. There's a lot being done. There's a great need, but there's a great force rising up to rise to the challenge and to look at meeting those needs. And I'm really encouraged by the leadership team at the city mission, and even beyond that, all the folks at the city mission really looking to understand these challenges, to jump in on them. Excited to get moving on these, and I see that I'm filled with hope. And then obviously knowing that we can work at meeting the physical needs, and that's really important, but that the work that the city mission is doing is going deeper than that and meeting the heart need. And we know that that's where it's a lot harder to put into a spreadsheet, but that's where a lot of the real change happens and the lasting change happens is looking at it from an angle of not just what's needed physically, but holistically, how can we serve these folks?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for being part of this. And I know you love a good podcast. So hopefully you become instantly famous because you've been on Not That Different. But give yourself a little personal plug. If people were interested in your work or getting to work with you, how would they find you?
Like I mentioned, the work that I do, I really enjoy the opportunity to serve nonprofits, and as you can tell, I get really fired up when I get to be in the nonprofit housing space. But that being said, I do work for folks in manufacturing, folks that own and operate real assets, and always happy to help out where I'm needed. So they can find me at jablonskiresearch.com, and connect with me there.
This has been an awesome time to get to know Sam and to understand the work that he's uncovering in the area where we live. If this episode has resonated with you and you are local to Cleveland, we'd love for you to reach out to the City Mission. You can go straight to our website at thecitymission.org to get involved. But if you're not local to this area, we'd really encourage you to find somewhere where you can plug in and use your skills and your talents to be able to help the neighborhood that you are a part of. We have appreciated you listening, and we just ask you to continue to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on the Not That Different podcast.